Greetings everybody, greetings Atlantic Canada and companies. We're delighted that you could join us today to talk about online in Japan, the online environment of doing business in Japan. It's an amazing market, a very good market to have online tools, very responsive, but very particular, very different from other markets that you might have encountered, very different from Canada, for example. So let's get started. I guess first of all with some introductions. My name is Susanna and I am Chief Content Officer at a company called IBT Online. I'm delighted to be working with the Atlantic provinces to help companies here with online tools. And I'm joined today by Aaron Smith, who's the Program Manager of the CBDC for Nova Scotia. And Aaron is someone that you can always reach out to for information, for help, for resources, she's incredibly efficient and will always be there to point you in the right direction or tell you who can answer your questions. Just a quick word also about IBT Online, who we are as a company. So IBT Online, we're actually a US company, but are delighted to be working with Canada and Atlantic provinces, the provinces to help Atlantic Canada companies with online tools like websites, online marketing. So we are 100% focused on website online marketing and 100% focused on small and mid-cap companies that want to grow their business internationally. So that's the core of what we do. Today's agenda, we're going to just recap quickly some of the resources available to you as an Atlantic Canadian company that are there for you at the moment in terms of webinars and resources and infographics about the online world. Then I'm going to start off with a couple of just big picture things on Japan, talking about the offline world, but also just the online world of Japan. Then we're going to look at what Japanese websites look like. They look quite different from a lot of US websites, Canadian websites, and they have to have some certain attributes to them. I'm going to spend a brief moment also on social media because it is a very reactive market. It's a market where you need to have some kind of social media plan to engage your prospects and your prospective buyers with. And then I'm going to round up with some takeaways and some action points for you. The webinar is scheduled to last about 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes if I get a bit slow. There's a lot to cover. So without any slowing down, let's then look at what I've called a helping hand for Atlantic Canadian companies. As a company, IBT, we have actually created a page on our website just to gather all the resources that we have for Atlantic Canadian companies, so the Atlantic provinces. So you can go onto that page and you'll find all these resources like infographics, like webinars, links to the webinars, and so on. And this really came about when there's also links to the 4 provinces. And also to the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. So we were very impressed how the provinces came together, the Atlantic provinces came together and working with the ACOA to build programs and to think about what their companies needed in the pandemic, post-pandemic, in the sort of new online world that we all seem to be finding ourselves in. So to reach out if we can be of any help for that. But as I said, there's quite a lot on our website already, sort of for you, including this list of webinars that we're doing at the moment. So there's a list of 9 webinars, and they range from things like website localization, which shows you the big picture of what is an international website and why, how does it have to be built, what are the must-haves for an international website. We've talked about global e-commerce and also online marketing. So it's 3 different webinars on those 3 topics. Then we've also drilled down about certain regions, whether that's online in the United States, online in Europe, Latin America, and today Japan. Next week we'll be looking also at South Korea for that. And so there's a lot, and you can, if you find webinars interesting, share them, think about them, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to let Erin speak for a moment and just introduce the CBDC and what resources you can get from that.
Thanks so much, Susanna. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Erin Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Association of CBDCs, and we're the delivery agent for the project that's hosting these webinars. The funding support for this project is made possible through the Atlantic Trade and Investment Growth Agreement. This is a partnership of ACOA and the 4 Atlantic provincial governments. We all know COVID's really amplified the need for selling and exporting online, and it's our hope that these webinars are going to give you some of the information and the tools that you need to do that successfully. There's lots of other supports available, so I would encourage you to reach out to your local government folks, be that federally or provincially, to see what they can do to help you out. So if you're not sure who those people are, we'll have a list at the end of the webinar with some contacts, or feel free to pop me a note, and I'm happy to make that connection and introduction for you. So that's all I need to say. Well, let's jump into selling online in Japan.
Thank you very much, Erin. Right, Japan. I wanted to start off by just a couple of basics, because while we're really on the online side only, some of these characteristics influence the websites and how and some of the online decisions and features, characteristics you'll find for websites and media in Japan. And I guess the first thing that we notice on the online side is that in fact Japan has some major neighbors: North Korea, Russia, China. And this means that they are very aware of digital compliance, of security, of hacking, things like that. They also open up to the huge Pacific Basin. So South Korea and the entire, Indonesia, Malaysia, there's a huge opening up there as well. And there's a lot of links between South Korea and the other big areas of the Pacific Basin and what you're doing on online world in Japan. The second thing I wanted to point out was Japan's actually about 7,000 islands, and they range from the north, Hokkaido, which is like, some of the smelliest place in the world, to in the south, Kumamoto, for example, which is incredibly hot, almost tropical. So it's very, very, very varied. And you'll see some of that variation when you're doing websites for that. And you'll see some of that when you're looking at online marketing. Despite the fact that it's 7,000 islands, it is incredibly well suited for, well served by its infrastructure, including its online infrastructure, 4G everywhere, 5G rolling out. So very few black spots for the internet. Another thing, I guess, is just how urban it is, or how much it's not so much that it's urban, that it's so concentrated. It is actually a very mountainous place, so it's really concentrated along the coastlines, which means, for example, Tokyo is apparently the largest metropolitan area in the world. Anyway, huge. So a couple of those things that also influence the online side. And just sort of a very, very sort of just to remind you about some of the other basics, the economic basics. It is the 4th largest exporter in the world, but it's also the 5th largest importer in the world. It is an incredibly beneficial place, an interesting place to do business. And I think for Atlantic Canadian companies, Japan is actually a major, major importer of shellfish, of seafood-based health products, things like that. There's a lot going on there that you could take advantage of as well. And something else, just about sort of the cultural side. Again, anyone who's done business in Japan, these are sort of stereotypes in a sense, but they flow into the online world too. That that there's this loyalty and commitment side, that you have to sort of portray in your website as well and in your social media. It's also rather a more humble place than one would find certainly in most North American websites. You're your Japanese website will be much more sort of low key, low sales. It's much more, we take a long-term view, very much inbound rather than outbound marketing and sales attitudes for that. Japan online, it's a big place. There's 126 million, 127 million people. One of the things that internet, 92% of everybody is online. So 127 million people, 116 of them are online. And, they're online really, really, really all the time. You'll note that there's like 50% more telephone connections, mobile phone connections, than there are people. Many people have 2 or 3 SIM cards that they're using, one for business, one for non-business use. But it does really mean that the Japanese are online all the time. They expect to have internet use wherever they are, whenever they are, mobile friendly as well. And when I said that they're online all the time, Japanese people spend something in the region of about 7 hours a day on average. So the average number of hours spent in Japan online is 7 hours a day. 116 million people spending 7 hours a day, that's the average. And you'll note that social media is very active too, 82 million, 65% penetration rate. That's about similar, well, Canada's about 65% too. So that's about a similar social media penetration rate as Canada. Just to home in on this online, on the mobile side, I said, that there's 50% more mobile connections than people. I think 93% of those mobile phones are smartphones. So again, you're expecting to be using the internet at all times whenever you feel like it. For that. If we look also at time spent on mobile devices, 1.5 hours spent on your phone using mobile per day. So some very big numbers there. But I really want to just emphasize, very plugged in. It is one of the most plugged in countries in the world. This just shows you this thing here about the most visited websites. I wanted to show you sort of, the Googles and things like that. I apologize. I'm working from home. That's my dog. Sorry, someone's at the door. If you look at the top 20 websites, you can see the names, Amazon, Docomo, and so on. And don't be fooled by the .com. They're all in Japanese. Even the Google.com is in Japanese. So you'll see that the JP, that stands for Japan. So I want to say that it is a very, very Japanese-centric online environment. Google has about a 55-60% market share in terms of search engine. Yahoo is the number 2, so about 40%. Yahoo used to be the dominant one. It is it's going down quite a bit for that. And generally, the older audiences still cling to sort of the Yahoo, but the younger generation, more tech savvy, will probably going more towards the Google. Just to emphasize this point about Japan having a very Japan-centric online environment, the top Google search queries are all in Japanese. I mean, there's YouTube and iPhone here as names, as brands, but there's everything is in Japanese. Another sort of characteristic about Japan is just how strong it is in terms of e-commerce. It is the 4th largest in the world in e-commerce, and growing, at 20% per year at the moment, despite being so large. But it's very dominated as well by its own domestic players. The largest B2C sort of retailer, as it were, online retailer is Rakuten, and that is very much a Japanese-born and bred online retailer. And Yahoo is very strong there too. I think what's interesting as well, if you look at some of the other ones besides Amazon are all Chinese after that. I wanted to point out sort of these, on this slide here, you can see Rakuten. Rakuten also has a global marketplace. They're trying to encourage non-Japanese to come on board and to participate on that. So that is actually, if you are looking at a B2C platform, that could be a place that you might want to look into, because they have this sort of global marketplace where you as a Canadian company can go on and you can write things in English. It's not ideal. It's a bit expensive, but if that's, that could be a good way of testing the market as well. I wanted to also point out cross-border e-commerce in Japan is very limited. Japanese people don't buy outside Japan. Only 10% of Japanese shop outside Japan. In comparison, over 35% of Canadians shop outside Canada. That's more like, actually, after 2021, it's more like 40%. Just also, I'm showing you now some slides. On the left-hand side, you can see images of Rakuten and what it looks like. It looks very different from what you would see. Okay, that's an image also of Yahoo, and for us looking at this looks incredibly cluttered and full of things. That is what it looks like in Japan. That's what they're used to seeing. That. So let's talk now about what makes a great Japanese website. I guess the first point is, first of all, it's in Japanese. And there's the top level domain, what we have in Canada is .ca. That's your top level domain name. You have AtlanticCompany.ca. The equivalent of the .ca domain name, the URL, is JP for Japan. Unfortunately, it's restricted, so not anybody can buy a JP. Just as in Canada, actually, the CA is restricted to Canadian. You have to prove that you have a Canadian residence. So the JP, if you have a distributor in Japan, they can buy it for you and then give it to you and things like that. But the JP is restricted. So that's why very often you'll find that that we switch around. And as a Canadian company, you can do this too. You can put jp.atlanticcompany.ca, and that works for .com. That works absolutely fine. So what you do in that case is you'll be telling Google and the other search engines that this website is for Japan, even if you don't have a JP at the end for that. In order to have that JP, you have to prove that you can communicate in Japanese, by the way. So it's a bit tedious, really. Other things, this is an example of a company, it's actually a US company. They, part of the main things they wanted to do was just to support their distributors there and show their end market and prospective buyers that they have a long-term commitment to that market. And one of the easiest ways of doing that was to build a Japanese website. The next thing I wanted to point out about Japanese websites is that the visual clues are incredibly important to the Japanese. They are expecting to be able to see certain clues and cues on your website, which will guide them through, which will help them understand it. The Japanese are very keen on their visual cues. If you think about the pervasiveness of comic books and the comic book cultures at all levels, and I'll show you some examples. There's hyper-realistic plastic models you see in restaurant windows, like the sashimi there. The Japanese are used to that, and that's what they want to see. These very contrasting colors in a small area is also something you'll find very often in terms of design. We're going to talk now a bit more, obviously mobile enabled, we'll talk about that. We're also going to be talking about shorter text and kanji and what that means for that. Other things about Japanese user experience. UX stands for user experience. If coming from a Canadian background, you look at their websites and you just think, it's a chaotic mess. And sometimes the words or the characters are horizontal, and sometimes they're vertical. The Japanese don't seem to mind. They can be read either vertically or horizontally. So they'll just stuff as much as possible onto a small space. They don't like the white space, the clean sort of white space. That's not for them. They just want a very packed, very colorful, impactful website. a lot of text, but a lot of information. They like to click through for more and more information. And they don't actually like graphics so much. They like icons and icons really, and high resolution images. Poor images have a very bad impression. So careful on that. A couple of examples here on the slide, just of big companies and their websites. You'll note that a lot of them are using animes as well. And here you have an example here of animes, but also the text going vertically and horizontally, and then speech bubbles coming up. It's quite a varied place. This company here is a good example. It's a company we know well. It's Maruka. It's a Japanese company. Maruka make heavy-duty machinery. They make dump trucks, huge machines that you use in forests, things that move gravel onto roads. Huge machines. And this is their home website, their core domestic home website. And there's little cartoon figures on it, and there's Forest Expo Online, and there's animes on it, and cartoons, and the entire website is like that. There's lots of, on the About Us page, there's a whole person the founder looks like a cartoon. Anyway, it's quite something for someone who's not Japanese. You look at this and you say, and for them, no, it's this culture also, they even have a word for it, of cuteness, which is something which is polite and engaging and something that you encourage because you want your viewer to like you and to respect you. The word in Japanese is kawaii, and that literally means a culture of cuteness. It's used all over Japan and for thousands of websites. And if you spend any time on this website, you start to develop your own sense of what passes as cute in Japan. So this is Maruka's Japan domestic website. This is their US website. And here you'll see, well, okay, this looks clean, white space, ordinary picture, no cartoons. So that's an example of localizing your website for a Japanese company to localize it for the US market. Okay, so that's the difference between those two markets. One of the big things you have to do in Japan and for Japanese websites and all Japanese online is to decide your characters. Are you going to be using, there are basically 3 types of characters. And unlike Chinese, there's no real dialect variations when it comes to writing. Dialects exist a little bit in spoken, but not in the writing. But for written, it can be complicated. The way that text is displayed is a incredibly important aspect of marketing. So in modern Japanese writing, there's a mixture of 3 basic scripts. The kanji has Chinese symbols or Chinese-like symbols. They come from the China side, as well as the hiragana and the katakana. But they're 2 phonetic alphabets, the latter 2, katakana and the hiragana, that were put up in syllables. The main difference is that hiragana is used for phonetic spelling out of Japanese words. Katakana is used for foreign words. Kanji is so that it's not a phonetic auxiliary. Instead, it's a set of characters that represent whole words. So typically, you tend to you can merge the 2. But for example, if you want to have your company name translated into Japanese, you would use katakana, for example. So you need to choose which ones you have for that. And if you have younger readers, then you're more likely to use the less complicated characters as well. Just a quick reminder about keywords. What are keywords? I know we've been through this a couple of times as a slide, but it's just important to remember that the keyword is the word that the person types in to find when they're when they go into the search engine. And the search engine then ranks the websites according to that word. Keywords are incredibly important in Japan. And some of the top tips for finding the right Japanese keywords, The first one is that you have to decide which of those 3 different writing platforms, kanji, katakana, and hiragana, you're going to use. And that'll depend slightly on your audience. Then you track those keywords in Google and Yahoo. We would do both because Yahoo does still have 40% market share. A last little thing is that because Japanese characters, similar to Chinese characters, are what's called double byte in length. So careful for your metadata and your back end of your website. Typically metadata has about 150 characters. In Japan, you really want to limit it to about 70, 75. Otherwise, because of that double byte nature of the Japanese characters. Just sort of another example here of sort of actually, I think it is a Canadian company who's gone and did a website in Japan. Again, I wanted to point out they've continued to use their name, Thermo Analytics, but also added how to pronounce Thermo Analytics, so transliteration next to the company's name, so that a Japanese person looking at it could be able to pronounce the Thermo Analytics. So that they would say, okay, that's how it's pronounced in a Japanese way. And again, they are the reason that the motivation for building that Japanese website was long-term brand recognition and commitment to the market, saying, yes, I am here for the longer term. I am committed to the market. Let's turn quickly then also to social media in Japan. It's, as I said, it's one of the most plugged-in markets in the world, and but has a very distinctive social media attitude to it as well. We talked earlier about how many people are on the internet. We said about 90% of the whole population is on the internet, about 65, and currently actually it's more like 70% of the population are using social media. Social media growth is growing at about, social media use is growing at about 10% a year. So there's some big changes going on in Japan, and more and more uptake of social media. And this actually came since the tsunami, that really devastating tsunami and nuclear disaster, when a lot of the population found that the only way they can get through and find people is also through social media. I wanted to point out as well, a lot of people still on social media, spending about nearly an hour a day just on social media. And the vast majority, 90%, 95% on their smartphones, very mobile enabled, as we've already said. The Japanese absolutely love YouTube. They're going on YouTube all the time. A lot of that has subtitles or even voiceover for them. So it's YouTube is by far the most popular social media platform for that. But I want to draw your attention also to something called Line. Line, it's 61%. It says use Line. Line is sort of like a WhatsApp, only a bit more for that. It's used especially by the older generation, also for work. It was originally actually a South Korean, I think, from Naver, but it's now very much dominates the Japan side as well as several other countries in that region. And I think Line, because they're seeing a fall off in some of their users in for the younger generation, they're actually upping their game a little bit and adding functionality, pay wallets, e-wallets, most recently. So there's Line Pay, there's Line Shopping, Line Brain. For that. So Line is definitely worth knowing about. The next one I wanted to point out as well is Twitter, but let's have a look as well on some of the profile of Line users in Japan. As I said, Line is very much the over 50s and plus, or let's say call it 40 years and plus. And before that, they're using much more like a Facebook or a WhatsApp, or actually Telegram, which is another app that you'll find very prevalent in that part of the world, in Asia and throughout Southeast Asia as well. So that's called Telegram. Line, as I said, has developed a whole bunch of new functionality, and one thing you can do, which is probably its single most popular thing you can do, is GIFs, and senior businessmen send each other these things. This is absolutely normal to send these animes and cartoons and GIFs to people, and Line has a very strong presence. One of the strongest presences in all of Japan for where to get them. So that keeps its hold on people. I wanted to say that the next one I wanted to talk about really is Twitter. And Twitter is really important in Japan. And Twitter, normally for business purposes, people don't usually use Twitter that much for business to business, thing like that. But it's absolutely essential in Japan. And there's a lot of thought about why it is. Why does Twitter appeal to the Japanese so much? There's a lot of thought about partly it's because you can, because of the characters, the way the characters are formed. Actually, you can say, when Twitter was first started, 140 characters, you can say a lot in 140 Japanese characters. That's a lot of sentences that you can write out, a lot of things you can say in that. But I think also Twitter appeals to a lot of the aesthetic sense in Japan, whether that's creating something in a small defined space, which is absolutely purpose-built for that small space. That appeals to the way the Japanese would like to do things. And it resembles a haiku. It resembles like a haiku Japanese poem. It's short, to the point, and so on. But as my Japanese colleague also tells me, these are all very positive reasons, but there's also another little reason why Twitter is so popular, she thinks, in Japan, and that is because it's anonymous. So very often you can say something on Twitter anonymously that perhaps socially you would not be able to say in Japanese culture. Facebook is obviously present in Japan, particularly with sort of over 30-year-olds, and it has a very effective advertising means for social media for you as a company. I would be wary though. Facebook Japan has the most expensive cost per click in the world. So don't use it. Just but don't make any mistakes because it's expensive in Japan. So just a word of warning, caution there. I just wanted to show you a few more slides of companies who are looking and who have done Japanese websites, very much resembling their Canadian or US website. If I look at the Japanese website there for this, you can see that you can keep your name in English. You can keep a lot of the video in English. But really the text has to be fully in Japanese. The Japanese are not keen on mixed texting. They're not actually terribly good at languages here, so it's important to make sure on that. I wanted to mention as well, we talked right in the very beginning about perhaps it's because of Japan's near neighbors. They are very wary of compliance, of security online. So make sure that your cookie policy, your privacy policy are up to scratch. Absolutely, and Japan has its own online compliance that you need to be aware of and compliant with. The fines can be quite large. They're similar in a sense. I mean, in many ways, what we do is we just take the sort of the gold standard, which is GDPR, in the European one of General Data Protection Regulation, and apply that because Japan's that definitely follows the Japanese one for that. So you would have to list all the cookies that you're got on your website with exactly what's going on pages and so on. So be careful of the compliance side. Make sure that your websites are fully compliant. Right. I've talked a little bit more than half an hour, but we're just wanted to summarize now some of the big action points that we've talked about. So first, just as a general point, why we think that you should look at your online business development tools. What are your business development tools? They're your website and your online marketing. That's basically your two things that you want to have, make sure are really up to scratch for 2021. Make sure that, and if you're looking for exporter, if you're looking to export and use those tools, they're the most cost-effective way of getting you found, understood, and doing business internationally. And as Erin said, there is assistance out there, and these webinars is part of that assistance. Then a quick reminder also, what is Japan Online? It is a very, very plugged-in place. Here are the numbers again. 92% of the population are online. 65 or 70% of them now are using active social media users. There are 50% more mobile phone connections than people. So an extremely plugged-in place, but also a very Japan-centric. Remember the number about e-commerce, that only 10% shopping outside Japan. It's a very distinctive and different market for that. Then just a reminder as well, the dedicated resources. You can go on our website. Excuse me. You can go onto our website. We have dedicated resources for you, including these webinars, and you can register for webinars here or listen to the recordings of webinars we've had. Of any that interest you, please do that. And if you like them, share them, think about them. If you have questions, get in touch. And then you do have a lot of resources in your provinces. So if you have questions and if you're thinking, what should I be doing now internationally? How can I support my business? How can I grow my business now? Then maybe you should reach out to Kevin or to Suzanne or Darlene or Trevor, or Cara. So reach out to your provincial, your province heads, and the export development agencies for your province. And if you get stuck, you can always ask Erin as well, just to guide you there. Reach out to your province, find out what is available for you. There's a lot of helping hands for Atlantic province companies. So for us, next steps then is, check out the webinars, sign up for webinars, download some of the recordings of the markets that interest you or the topics that interest you. Maybe get your teams together around the table and say, what are our online tools? Are we up to scratch everywhere? Should we be making improvements? What can we do that's better to reach to our prospective buyers more? And if we can help, please do get in touch with me or with Erin directly. Thank you all so much, and we hope that you found it useful and engaging. Continue and continue trading, continue growing your business, growing your exports, growing your international presence. And as I said, if we can be of any help, let us know. We're happy to help, and we're here to help you and support you. Thank you all so much, and happy trading, and I hope to see you soon in person. That would be a nice change, wouldn't it? Take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.